Welcome to the warm-up exercise for the YMI podcast called The Fantasy Restaurant. In here, my guests get to pick their favorite drink, appetizer, main side, and dessert. Absolutely anything goes. Thom is on a mission to not only build an excellent meal, but educate us plain muggles at breakneck speed. It's a lot of information fast. I mean, I may have to rewatch this a couple of times just to make sure it all sinks in properly. At any rate, I hope you enjoy this meal with Thom. Thom, thank you for joining me in the Fantasy Restaurant today.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. All right. So this is the Fantasy Restaurant, right? It's no ordinary restaurant. This restaurant, anything goes, right? So I'm going to be asking you all kinds of different menu items, and these could be from your childhood, like some of your favorite stuff. This could be something your mom makes, your grandma makes, something you make. This could be something from your favorite restaurant or from your favorite fantasy novel or movie. This meal means no rhyme or reason, no theme. It just has to make sense to you, man. So you ready to jump in?
Go for it.
Excellent. All right. So let's start at the start, man. What are you going to have to drink Fantasy Restaurant?
So I'm a teetotaler.
Me too. Good company.
Genetically, never been a drinker. Whenever you tell people you don't drink, there's the, oh God, should I ask why?
Yeah.
As I always have to mention, like, just natural. No, there's no rock bottom story. There's no dead toddler in a driveway. There's no, I didn't know the kid was in the car. There's none of that. My mother's side of the family just doesn't drink. They're also crazy Jesus freaks. I thought those were related. Now I don't think they are, because I'm not, and I don't drink. I think they also coincidentally just don't like alcohol.
Okay.
So with that said, I tend to go for mocktails.
Okay.
I will warn you, I'm a former chef. I went to culinary school. I'm third generation out of New Orleans. My grandfather, my dad, and then I all cooked professionally. My grandfather, a chef. My dad, a very serious amateur. And then me, myself, a professional chef. Worked for Rick Bayless, worked for Hillstone, currently worked for Hog Salt, but in the IT department. So I still work in restaurants. So I'm way into this exercise.
I like the informed
when
consumer.
I went to Charlie Trotter's before it closed here in Chicago. Charlie Trotter's was your first like real famous celebrity chef in this area. And they do the whole 15-course tasting menu. If you want something similar, look up Alinea, kind of a similar idea, little foams and weird stuff. They serve a wine accompaniment for every course. You could pay an extra, it's like $1,000 to get in. But for another $200, you can get wine or a drink with every of the 15 courses. And for $100, a mocktail version. And I had one that was essentially a lemonade. It was a lemon, lime, grapefruit balanced lemonade with some sweeteners, probably agave, maybe a little bit of honey. So just a fancy elevated lemonade. But they put vanilla balm in it. It's a vanilla oil, like you'd make chapstick out of.
Yeah.
It coats the mouth. It gives a more rich, it's like you're drinking, if you put ice cream in something, it gives a richness, and that fat coats the mouth. And it's a trick I've stolen now for all kinds of drinks I make. I do a whiskey. So I make drinks. I just don't drink them. But I do an old fashioned with a bacon wrapped whiskey. So you boil the bacon in whiskey, then you put it in the fridge, then you scrape the fat off. And now the whiskey has a bacon flavor. And then I take that fat, render it into a balm, put it back in the whiskey. So the bacon flavor has a light, but it's not like you ate a chunk of bacon with your drink. It's just like the memory of the bacon in your drink. So there's a mocktail and a cocktail for our starter. I promise all the answers won't be that long.
No,
I'm just the person you ask these questions to who's thought about it this much.
No, I love, like I said, I love an informed consumer. And like I would assume that like that flavor, when you're doing it kind of the balm, that's going to stick with you longer, right? That's definitely going to be like the aftertaste.
And the
like
next
finish,
thing
right?
you taste also, certain chemicals are fat soluble. Some things are cold soluble, fat soluble, alcohol soluble. That's why someone like me would cook with wine. Why? Well, it pulls certain flavors out of the thing, whatever the thing is, like say the bone. And once they're out of the bone, I can reduce, water, remove. I can control the levels. So that fat staying on your tongue means the next thing you taste will be more intense, more mellow, more how the chemicals react with the fat that's left in your mouth. Or do they? If it's cold, it won't do anything. It'll just slide off the cold fat. So the next course, you have to think of, if you served a fatty dish or a fatty soup, then that's going to affect the next course. So for some reason I had ice cream in the middle of a meal, I'd have to think about my next thing. I've got a 3 to 5% fat in that last dish. How's that going to affect my fennel? How's that going to affect my rosemary or my cinnamon or my hot sauce? I think you'd make hot sauce more intense. So be careful,
Does that mean, I guess following that line, does that mean like sometimes you would create like an amuse-bouche that would set up the very first course sort of thing, just like a teensy little bite?
You got to be aware of that, but in amuse-bouche, in a perfect world, what it does is it tells you thematically what I'm about as a chef. It should have elements of things I like. So for me, a lot of biochemistry, a lot of that sort of Alinea style stuff, but I don't do on that level. I like it more in the home. But I'm thinking chemically, I'm thinking scientifically, I'm thinking temperatures and molecules. So not on that level that they cook on. So my amuse-bouche should give you something like a crystal or a foam, but on top of like a biscuit or a bagel. So you get the idea that I'm common mostly, but there's this little layer of science nerd. So an amuse-bouche should give you an idea of what the meal and the chef are all about. But then also, yeah, as the chef, you got to think that I just serve something spicy at the beginning, and then I'm going to serve a celery root soup. That makes no sense. So you'd have to change your amuse-bouche to have it still represent you, and yet it's got to say something about you and your restaurant and your meal that evening or that season or whatever. But an amuse-bouche should do all those things. In a perfect world, sometimes it's just some leftover shit from yesterday.
That sounds like an awful lot of pressure for one little bite.
And that's what we like, though, is that idea of like how it's like a haiku or blues. I once had a guitar teacher tell me if you play the blues too well, you play in jazz. The blues is intentionally, can you be Stevie Ray Vaughan using only the tools in his toolbox? You don't get to do this. You don't get to do a crazy diminished minor chord. You got to be interested in playing bom 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 bom. Can you make, and talking about your girl made you sad for the billionth fucking time. Can you make a good blues song with a haiku? You've put yourself into a box on purpose. And this will come back around to my show, actually. I intentionally kind of did that with FreakShow&Tell. And with the amuse-bouche, you're taking up the challenge of it's impossible to put your entire history, the restaurant and the season into a single bite. But that didn't stop you from trying hard. And that's the challenge and the fun. Even if you miss, it's fine, still delicious. It's a nice little bit of deer foam on a piece of venison with a little quail egg and a little cranberry on top. And they liked it. And that's what ultimately matters. They liked it. They gave you money, win-win.
Yeah, absolutely. I can dig it, man. I can dig it. All right. Well, I mean, I'm hooked. I'm in. So normally this is the part where we hit the appetizer, and I am generally the most adventurous right here, right? Like this little, it's kind of like a little finger food. So, and usually there's a little bit something crazier on here. I usually go for that. No pressure. I'm not saying you have to be crazy. I mean, this could be pretty bog standard, but what are you going for appetizer wise?
I do a smaller version of oysters bienville. So oysters bienville is, I'm from New Orleans, Louisiana. Oysters bienville is a cooked oysters cooked in a paper bag. So I do an appetizer size, so a very small paper bag. It's a variation of the French en papillote. So you take a parchment paper, you put some veggies down, you put a nice piece of fish on top, you roll it up, you put it in the oven for 15 minutes, and then when the customer opens it up, the steam comes up. The New Orleans version of that is the poor man's papillote, French for pocket. So take a paper bag, put your oysters, it's a wax bag, like a butcher's bag, oysters, little white wine, seasonings, roll it up, and you're barely cooking it because it's oysters. Till they open, put them on a plate, rip the bag open. So it's much more like a walk-in taco version of a oysters on papillote.
And so
but you can flavor that a million ways. That can be spicy, that can be sweet. So every night I could vary it and just always have it be oysters bienville, but there's variation there.
Well, what is it tonight? Is it spicy? Is it sweet?
Spicy. Yeah, I would say spicy.
Spicy.
I like spicy. I like to open with spicy, especially if you're doing a New Orleans dish.
All right. Well, what are you going to pair with that? Are you going to do like a sauce like some people do Tabasco or whatever? I mean, what goes with that?
It's in the bag. That's the nice thing is it cooks in a sauce.
Ready to go.
Should be. Yeah. If you've done it correctly, it should be you scoop the oyster and you try and catch some of the sauce with it. Put some bread on the side. If the sauce is good enough, you want to mop it up.
All right. Well, you perfectly segued me, or rather segued me into the this little interstitials piece I like to call the bread/salad/soup area. You know, it's kind of that in between where this little bridge you've got or this gulf you've got a bridge over. So you're getting bread, salad, soup, any combination. What are you doing there?
So I like an old school. I miss this when there used to be a ton of stuff done tableside. We only see it now with like guacamole is made tableside.
Oh yeah, they're actually making it right there in front of you. Yeah.
If you're making a Caesar salad in the kitchen, Why the fuck you have a Caesar salad on the menu? It was developed by the chef to take pressure off the kitchen, and the waiters make it tableside.
Huh.
They should roll out a cart. Who's having Caesar? They chop it right there. They put it in a bowl. They toss it really high. They tell you about the specials, introduce themselves, talk about the wine, and they take their big pieces of lettuce and everything sticks to them. So you can grab them with tongs, put a couple pieces on everybody's plate. Crackers, croutons for you, croutons for you, croutons for you, croutons for you. All right, my name's Thom. Be taking care of you. The server assistant rolls that cart out of the way. What are we thinking about for drinks, folks? I got bread on the way. Welcome. And that's the Boosh is already at the table before I get there, etc. So I love table side service, and it went away because the training level's higher, expectations are different for customers, not audiences. But once upon a time, you had Sherry's Jubilee, you had Bananas Foster. For an entree, I'd probably do a roast chicken carved table side, but there were certain things that the server would, or the captain would, come out the way they open a bottle of wine right there in front of the table for no good reason. They would serve soups or family style veggies in the same way. And it died around the 70s, I think.
But you're bringing it back.
I think it's time. And I think, honestly, the idea is still sound. We're busy as hell. And if you're not, then make a salad for the people. Like, just include it like you would bread. Just include it in the price of admission. You're going to get a Caesar salad. If you don't want it, don't eat it. I won't make it for you. But you've already paid for it. Would you like it now? And then the waiter can talk. It also gives them a chance to interact with their table in a non-awkward way. You're standing there anyway. They've got questions, you know.
All right. Well, in your opinion, what constitutes the perfect Caesar salad? Describe it for me.
There's a lot of variation on this, but so you got to put anchovies in the dressing. You're making a variation of a Russian dressing. And then the whole idea, the legend goes that Chef Cesar did this because it was what he had in the larder. It's what he had. So it's like the way you'd make a daily special. You open the fridge and go, what's old? That fish is from yesterday. I need to sell that rutabaga. That eggplant's not looking so good. I'm making a fish stew. And so then from that, the idea is born. All cooking shows take this, and that's the premise of every cooking show ever. It's what in culinary school is called a blind box or a modified blind box. In culinary school, you never do a blind box, but you do a modified blind box. I write on the board behind me, these are the ingredients that are going to be in the room tomorrow. I need an appetizer. I need an entree. I need a starch. I need a vegetable. I need a sauce. I need it plated within 2 hours. So start planning your recipe tonight, chefs. See you in the morning for your exam. It's a modified black box or educated black box. That becomes, what is it called? Iron Chef. So they tell them all the ingredients and then they surprise them with which one they've chosen. So they tell you it's going to be one of these 5. Develop your recipes. Then on the day, act surprised. Oh, swordfish. But they didn't know which exactly. It's an educated black box.
I can dig it.
So I would say freshly shaved Parmesan, big ribbons. You really want those two. You want heterogeneity. Every bite's not the same. Every now and then you want a big bite of Parmesan where it's almost too much Parmesan. Dress it correctly. Make your own croutons. They should be soft in the middle, crunchy on the outside. Other than that, work on your dressing, and that's about all you should put in there. You put a little raw egg yolk unless the customer has an issue with that, and then we can use a cooked version from the cooler. If they're 75 years old or they have a HIV or a brand new kidney or something that makes them immunocompromised, raw egg's a bad idea. Pregnant lady, raw egg's a bad idea. I got some in the cooler, just as good. You know, not quite the same, but close. Throw it on there for her. And yeah, keep it simple, stupid. A Caesar should be, I taste every single thing. Heterogeneity, right? So a little different levels, but every bite has some bread, some lettuce, some cheese, some dressing.
I can dig it. So it's not, I mean, it's variation not only
fresh black pepper
in flavor, but also in texture, right? So, I mean, it's gonna be a little different every time you take a bite.
And it's a small salad. It shouldn't be very much. It's not a giant American style. It's a small Mexican style resort. So a fancy place in Mexico is where this was born. So like the Four Seasons in Guadalajara kind of thing. So it should be very much of that culture, not of our culture, which is huge with salmon and chicken on it. That's a different thing. That is its own animal.
Okay. All right. So how about bread? You're going to have bread. I remember you with the oysters you were mentioning, you'd like a little bit of bread to get to the sauce. What's the perfect bread
sourdough.
look like?
We've got the perfect bread at Bavette's, one of the steakhouses in the restaurant company I work for. It's a boulet. It's a French sourdough boulet. As long as you can keep your starter going, do a sourdough. It's too hard to do at home. We learned that during the beginning of the pandemic. We all watched Tiger King and made sourdough bread. But now I think more than ever, your customers can appreciate the fact that it's a bitch and it's not easy. There are some places in San Francisco that have 150-year-old starters that their family has kept alive through earthquakes, through presidencies, through, so you can build a reputation on it. You can sell it out the back door too. It's the kind of thing people will buy a loaf for $25 and take home.
So is the sourdough going to be hot at the table? Like it's come out of the oven? Or do you like a room temperature? Where are you at?
I always fight with this. Nothing should be fresh off the grill. Everything has to rest. Scientifically, it's called setting the crumb. If you pull bread right out of the oven and eat it, you've done it wrong. The crumb has to set. It's a baker's term. So I think maybe you grill it a little bit because customers want it really way too hot. And you're going to argue with the person giving you money. So you slice it thick, you toast both sides, you leave it the proper temperature in the middle. It's the best you're going to get from them. So a thick slice.
All right. Well, how about butter that you're going to serve with that? What do you prefer?
Irish curry butter, and then you do a maitre d' butter. So you mix it with herbs, you rewrap it, you roll it, you cut it into coins, use that on your steaks, and you use that table side. So it's like fun colors. You can mix all kinds of interesting. Julia Child famously has an orange butter she makes. So you can do that for dessert. Then you can do savory butters, garlic, bacon, chive, parsley, turmeric. Get it, make fun colors where the coins can be 3 different colors. For Latin Pride Week, the colors of the Mexican flag. For Bastille Day, the colors of the French flag, that kind of thing. You can also pair it to different stuff. So I'd say just curry butter, a little salt, a little parsley, make a hotel butter with that, send it out with the bread.
Oh, man, I love it. I don't think I've ever had it that style.
So easy to do, too. Let your butter soften, add some bullshit to it, and then roll it into roughly a cylindrical. Wrap it, and then you want to counter twist both sides until it's really tight. Tie it off, hang it in the fridge so there's no flat side. Hang it like a sausage.
Yeah.
Overnight. Then you unwrap it, you cut it into coins, and when you finish your steak, a little steak salt, a little fat salt on the top, a couple of coins of butter, put it in front of your date. The coins will melt very slowly, and you get a ooh. They also make a sauce on the plate as they run down the steak. They make a sauce right there on the plate for you to sop up as you're eating your steak. It's fantastic.
God. You're making life sound so complicated.
If you don't enjoy cooking, it's a nightmare. If you enjoy cooking, it's a privilege.
No, I enjoy watching people that are amazing at what they do perform that task. And it sounds like one of the tasks I would delegate to somebody else. But so we've got the starter, salad, bread done. Now, arguably, the most important part, maybe not in my opinion, but let's see what you say. What are you getting for your main dish?
I think steak, veg, starch. I think you do a nice ribeye, properly cooked, butter basted, thyme and garlic. Shouldn't go above medium rare. Again, you can't fight with a customer, but there's a science to how a steak is cooked. So you can argue with me all day that it should be medium well. You're just wrong, and I'm sorry. You don't think there's a science to this? There is. If we found a new animal on a new planet, I could take it back to my kitchen and within a couple hours tell you how it should be cooked. It should be cooked until the fat turns to liquid but doesn't leave the muscle mass. That's how that cut of steak should be cooked, which is why a skirt steak is best medium, almost mid-well. It's why a filet mignon is best rare, because the fat emulsifies but doesn't leave, and that's what causes moistness in the mouth. It's actually a protoglobin. It's not hemoglobin. It's phyloglobin. It's the one that makes muscles work. It's not blood. It looks like it's bloody, but Kool-Aid's also red. Not everything red is blood. But that globule that's in there has to liquidize. And if you go too hot, too long, it leaves the meat. And that's why you have a dry piece of steak. So for a ribeye, and keep in mind also this animal on earth has been bred for that piece of it to be cooked to this temperature for 8,500 years. You're only about 8,000 years too late with your opinion. We decided this 8,000 years ago, and the farmers have bred it to where if that piece doesn't work medium rare, that goes in the garbage and its offspring are killed. That's the way we've done it for 8,000 years. That's selective breeding, right? So we know for a fact that Chateaubriand, which is where you cut the filet mignon from, that Chateaubriand, if it isn't perfect when it's cooked rare to medium rare, then that animal is destroyed, and so are all of its offspring. We have gone down a wrong line of breeding. Kill it. Go back a step and figure out where you went wrong with the great-grandfather or whatever. We've done that for so long. So a ribeye, properly cooked, a nice potato, just whipped potatoes. You can do cold cannon if you like, but I prefer just a nice whipped potato, cream butter, white pepper, salt. And then haricot vert, French green beans, parboiled, barely cooked, and then finished on the grill so they're charred. And that's where your hotel butter goes on all that. All that shit gets butter on it. So I'm French. Throw butter on everything. You don't need a sauce. It'll make its own sauce. But if you must, then a béarnaise.
So I've always heard, like, with a steak, I mean, you mentioned it with the bread, like after you bake it, you're supposed to rest it or whatever. I've always heard that after you cook a steak, you're supposed to rest that for a while, right?
Half the time it took to cook it. And that includes your Thanksgiving turkey. That sucker can sit on the counter for 45 minutes, lightly tinted in foil. So when you cook something, the protein chains, they break and they fold and they tighten. And that's denaturing. That's how you know something's cooked as opposed to raw. So we use the term cook, but a ceviche is acid. In fact, I'm working on a cookbook right now. So that's the Fire Eaters cookbook. It's a spice recipe for, okay. The other one, we're going to base down, acid up. That's the way we like to cook. And it's cooking without heat. So making whipped cream is cooking using force. I'm changing the shape of the proteins in the albumin so they rise and hold air. That's whipping cream.
Right.
But I'm not using heat. If you do that, it's a buttercream. It's different. I take ceviche and put it in lime, and it cooks in the lime juice. I put it in the oven, and it cooks with heat. The term we're using is denaturing when we talk about it scientifically. We're denaturing the meat. As that protein, it should be a straight line. As the blocks that keep it straight break, it does like that. And it'll be like that in your mouth. If you leave it alone, it'll go like that a little bit. And that's what you're waiting for. And there's a measured moment where it does this, and then it stops. And now you're just letting your steak get cold. And once upon a time, we measured that. We put 40 steaks in the window, and we tasted one every minute for 40 minutes until we discovered at like 15, 20 diminishing returns. It's not getting any more tender. It's just getting colder, less interesting. All this has been done by chefs for 300 years. Now we know why that's happening. In the 1600s, Escoffier just lined up 40 steaks and just did it through, rote chesting. So that Thanksgiving turkey, let it rest. You got 45 minutes to cook your sides. If you cook a steak, 10 minutes, let it sit for 5. Roast chicken, cook it for 30, let it sit for 10, 15. And that's very important to rest your meat. That's why the juices aren't running out when you cut into one at a restaurant. And it's why it's one of the reasons it's so very tender when you go to a proper steakhouse.
Man, I did not expect to learn so much so quickly.
I'm a science. I mean, my degree's in applied science. That's what a culinary degree is. So yeah.
All right. Well, let's bring it home. You already hit the sides and stuff like that. So dessert, right? Are you kind of a sweet tooth person?
Bananas Foster or Cherries Jubilee. You light it on fire. You tell a story. There's a story of Sheriff Foster who outside the Brennan's restaurant on Royal Street. There were too many ladies of the night working in front of their restaurant. Royal Street was the street to be on. What's Bourbon Street? Never heard of it. Royal, 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 Royal. Sheriff Foster said, hey, get the hell out of here. Go to Bourbon Street where nobody's at. And what happened? Fame. Fame follows sex. As a thank you, the Brennans created a dessert called Bananas Foster. It's rum, a couple kinds of sugar. You reduce, you fire the rum up, you flame it, you pour the bananas and rum brown sugar sauce over ice cream. Serve. Cherries Jubilee, very similar. I'd do both, depending on the night, because anytime you cook it for 2 people minimum, you can't really make it for 1. So it's a better ROI for the restaurant. But then you got somebody telling that story. We call it shucking and jiving. You shuck an oyster and you jive. That's where the term comes from. Shucking and jiving's a New Orleans thing. At the oyster bar, imagine the sushi chef telling you stories about Japan while you're hanging out in Japan. We did that in New Orleans. We'd shuck and we'd jive. We did that with our dessert. We did that all the way through the meal. So yeah, I would have the waiters out there shucking and jiving. There's no real fun story about Cherries Jubilee. Make one up. I'm sure the one about Bananas Foster is bullshit too. Make up something fun or tell them about yourself. Tell them about the restaurant. Tell them a funny story. Tell them about the time Justin Bieber came in here. I don't care. Have some face-to-face time and light it on fire. Get your oohs and ahs. Get your Instagram moments and serve the dessert.
All right. Well, it's coming down to the wire. You've got to pick Cherries Jubilee or Bananas Foster. What are you going to go with personally?
Cherries Jubilee. I like cherries better than bananas every day.
Really? I don't think I've had Bananas Foster. I've had amazing Bananas Foster, and then I've had mediocre, but I've never had Cherries Jubilee.
I mean, I like both, but I prefer like a cherry clafouti over like a banana bread. Like I just prefer cherries. I don't know why.
I mean, I dig them both. I try not to discriminate whenever possible. I want to be open and honest about everything. All right, so I'm going to read back your menu. Let's see how bad I butchered it, which I'm sure I would absolutely fail at being a waiter. So save your harsh critiques for later. So we're going to, I think you said the lemonade from Charlie Trotter's. Is that
Close
correct?
enough. Yep. It's the one I stole the idea from there. Yep.
Okay.
A Charlie Trotter's inspired lemonade.
Inspired-esque. All right. And then we're going to do the oysters Bienville. Is that right?
Yep.
And we're going to do it spicy.
Yeah.
And does that come in the bag and like they open it for you? They present it and open it? Or is that something
The waiter
for you to do?
opens it in front of you, so the hit the scent. You put your face over it, so the whole thing, bam.
All right. So we're doing table service and all this stuff, right? So next is going to be
Well,
the
at least
Caesar
with
salad.
that you would. Caesar salad, that is made tableside.
All right. So that's made tableside as well. So to me, this is a very interactive meal. So it's a lot of presentation. You were talking about the shuck and
showmanship.
jive. Yeah, man, I dig it. Which oddly enough seems to really fit your character from everything I know about you thus far. Imagine that. Then we're going to do a nice sourdough. You said it's going to be the Irish curry butter, and then we're putting some salt and parsley in there.
Yep.
All right. And we're going to make sure we set the crumb on that bread, so it's going to come out just the way you like. Next, we're going to do a ribeye, butter basted, medium rare, the proper medium rare. We are going to do potatoes whipped, and then we're going to have the French green beans, and we're topping it off. We're not topping off. We're finishing off with a cherries jubilee.
Perfect. Sounds amazing.
Excellent. Well,
And it's not what you do, it's how you do it. It's all bumping it with a trumpet. Everyone can take their clothes off. You got to get a gimmick.
Bumping it with a trumpet. When I heard you say that the first time, I just imagined that's like a new and interesting way to do a line of coke. Bump it with the trumpet.
Sort of, yeah. She's talking about more bumping her hips. You got to bump it with the trumpet, like shaking her ass. But yeah, the idea is sound, yeah.
All right, man. Well, I hope you enjoyed your meal, and thank you for joining me in the fancy restaurant.